guys, so today we're going to be discussing passing notes and targeting, and this is my first video in this little sort of series about how to play jazz improvisation, where we're going to start using outside notes or notes outside of the scale that we're in to create tension to then resolve it. And I'm going to take you through essentially how to do all of that. Now, you may have seen my video on passing chords, that is, chords that you pass by to get to a different chord in the chord progression. Passing notes are essentially the same thing, but notes in your improvisation rather than chords in your chord progression. So targeting means playing a little phrase in your improvisation and ending on a specific note, the note that you're targeting, your target. Now, the note that you target can be any note whatsoever, whether it's inside the scale or outside the scale, it doesn't matter. You can use any note as your target. But generally, for a strong resolution, you target one of the notes that make up the chord that you're playing. So the 1, 3, 5, or 7. Especially the guide tones, that is, specifically the 3 and the 7. So if you are playing the chord C major 7, your targets would generally be C, E, G, or B. And passing notes are notes you pass through to get to your target. So if you're on, again, the C major 7 and your target is the E, you could play something like. Then one way to think about that little improvisational phrase is that these were passing notes and then you hit your target. So you can have multiple passing notes on your way to your target, but generally when people talk about passing notes, they refer to one note, the note directly before the target note. So in that little phrase, the passing note would be considered the F, because the F was the note directly before I played the E, the target. And the passing note has to be one note away from the target. So if E was our target, our passing notes could either be the F or the D. So let's take a simple chord progression like a 2-5-1 in the key of C major. And let's target the third of every chord. So on the D minor 7, let's target the F. On the G 7, let's target the B. And on the C major 7, let's target the E. So playing just those target notes, it would sound something like this. And playing one passing note beforehand could sound something like. Right, so I had a passing note to the target, passing note to the target, passing note to the target. You can obviously make that a bit more complex, something like. Right, so that melody was a little bit more complex. It went something like. So that was our target, so we'll call the note directly before that our passing note. So the G, then it went something like. That was our target, the note directly before that was the A, our passing note. And then we wanted to get to the to the E, sorry, so we went something like. So our passing note was the D going to the E, the target. Now in that little example, I was using diatonic passing notes. That is, notes from the scale from the key that we're in, from the C major scale. Now that's fine, but that's a little bit boring. And the whole point of passing notes is that you pass through them. They don't actually matter. The target is what matters. That's your, I suppose, your target, your resolution. So that means instead of using diatonic passing notes, you can use chromatic passing notes. That is, passing notes one semitone away from your target note. And that means you can use notes outside of the C major scale, and already that's going to make your improvisation sound a bit more interesting, a bit more complex, and create a little bit of tension before really quickly resolving it. So obviously some chromatic passing notes are still also diatonic notes, still within or inside the scale. So for example, if we were targeting the E, the F is both a semitone away, a chromatic step away, and part of the C major scale, so it's also a diatonic passing note. So I'm going to avoid that for the moment. So I'm going to play that same little chord progression, targeting thirds again, the third of each chord. And this time I'm going to play chromatic passing notes, and specifically trying to play outside of the scale, so using the sharps and flats, and then resolving to that third, back into the scale to, I suppose, for the resolution, to resolve the tension. So now your little improv can sound something like this. Right, so my target was again the F over the D minor 7, the passing note was the F sharp. The target was the B over the G7, and the passing note was the B flat. And the target was the E over the C major 7, the passing note was the E flat. And already that sounded a little bit more interesting. It sounded like little off notes, a little bit of tension being built before quickly resolving that tension. Right, so already it sounds a little bit more jazzy than just... Right, that sounds almost like ballad popish, kind of boring. But as soon as you start throwing in these little off notes that build a little bit of tension really quickly before quickly resolving it to the target or to your guide note, starts sounding a little bit more interesting, a little bit more jazzy. Right, so passing note to the guide tone, 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 passing note to the guide tone. And that sounds really nice. Sounds like you're moving outside the scale, you're doing something a little bit jazzy, but still relatively safe in the scheme of things. But it's beginning to sound like a proper solo, rather than just sort of playing up and down on the scale. Right, so this type of idea, targeting with chromatic notes, was used a lot in bebop, especially by people like Charlie Parker. And what he loved to do especially was using a flat ninth in a dominant chord to resolve to the fifth of a tonic chord. So if we're going from the G7 to the C major 7, so from the 5 to the 1, the flat 9 from the point of view of the G7 is the A flat. And what he would do is he would jump from the 3rd to the flat 9th to the A flat, or he would run up the arpeggio from the 3rd up to the flat 9th, and then resolve down one semitone to the G, which is the 5th of the tonic. So it would sound something like, or. Right, so I either ran up the little arpeggio to the flat 9, resolving to the 5, or I just made a straight big jump from the 3rd to the flat 9, resolving to the 5. Now, up until this point, I've been explaining passing notes in terms of targeting specific chord tones, or notes within the chord. But you can also use passing notes in your melody to make your melody a bit more interesting and to sort of like jazz up or improvise a little bit using the melody. So, as an example, let's take Fly Me to the Moon, where the melody goes... So you can put in passing notes, like for example, that first little phrase is targeting the F there, which is actually the 3rd of the D minor 7, which is the chord that it moves to. So you could add a little passing note, a chromatic passing note, and do something like this. So I added that little F sharp or G flat as a passing note before I got to the target, which is there. Right, and you can do that all through the melody, so. And it doesn't have to be in the same direction that you're moving. Like in this case, I went. So I was descending and I sort of continued descending from the passing note to the target. But then on the way back up, I was ascending, and then I still decided to descend from the passing note to the target. And did the same there, sort of went descending and then ascended from the passing note to the target. So you can play around with the melody like that. So that's all I really wanted to cover. And I suppose to summarize quickly, passing notes can be used both in the melody, as you're heading towards a target note, or just in a random improvisation, where you're targeting a note within the chord, and just using a little passing note to get there. Moving outside of the scale, creating tension, resolving straight back into it. Cool, hope that made sense. Again, feel free to leave any questions or comments if anything didn't make sense. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See ya.